All right, good morning. Welcome back to my live series. Today we are bringing on Kate, the running DPT, to chat all things strength training for runners. So let me go ahead and grab her. Okay, so today's going to be a little different. We're going to do like a Q&A back and forth, which I'm super excited about. And there she is. I'm good. How
Hey,
are
Sarah,
you?
how are you? Yeah, I'm great. I know it's a little earlier for you
Yeah,
over there.
I know the East Coast, West Coast time difference is actually pretty big.
Yeah, we're
Crazy.
on
We're
lunch.
still mid-morning here.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for inviting me to come on for a today.
Yeah, sorry, it cut out for a second. But yes, thank you so much for coming on. I'm really excited to just have this conversation. Strength training, I think, especially as runners, is so confusing, and it's confusing in general. So I'm excited to just kind of debunk some of the myths.
I absolutely agree. And I think at this point too, most runners understand that they should be strength training in some kind of way, but really get the how and what that looks like
Yeah, for
are
sure.
valuable because as you said, there's a lot of conflicting information out there.
Yeah, for sure. Before we get started, can you just tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do and all of those good things?
Absolutely. So my name is Kate. I am a physical therapist, run coach, and strength coach. About 2 years ago, I went all in on the Running DPT, which is my run coaching business, where I work mostly with amateur beginner runners, teaching them how to strength train, become stronger and more resilient runners to minimize their
Nice.
injury
That is
risk.
amazing. I love that you went all in. It's such a needed area. So, way to go.
Absolutely. Thank you. A lot of fun. And, it's been amazing working with such
That is
incredible runners.
awesome. And then, yeah, for anyone that doesn't know me, maybe some of your people, I am Dr. Sarah Louie. I'm a doctor of physical therapy. I specifically work with women runners and help them return to running pain free. That looks like strength training, that looks like specific exercise, and it also looks like run coaching to kind of an end goal. So we really have a ton of overlap in what we do. So that is really fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so great to have so many amazing providers,
Yeah, for
in
sure.
this
It's
field.
super awesome to get to collaborate as well. Um, Sorry, my connection's like a little laggy, so if I'm like feel like I'm not paying attention, that's why. That's all. Um,
That's totally okay. My
it's like
side
coming
okay?
in and out a little bit, like your just your audio, but I don't know if that I don't know what I don't know. Okay,
Okay, I just went back on the
perfect,
Wi-Fi.
perfect, perfect.
That will help.
Okay, let's get into it. So we're doing like Q&A, kind of just we'll both respond to
Mhm.
the questions today. So a little bit different than I normally do. But our first question is, how often should runners be strength training?
Yes. So we kind of chatted about this as well. So as far as strength training for runners, it really kind of depends on, what season you're in, what your current training focus is. But for most runners, I typically am having them do 2 to 4 sessions per week, really only getting up to like 3 and 4 if we're not working on, really specific running goals, like we're not training for a race. But for the casual runner just looking to regularly strength
Yeah,
train, I
I,
recommend
I
twice a
totally
week.
agree. I think one of the reasons it gets really daunting is because we think that we're supposed to strength train the same amount throughout the whole year. However, if you're in like peak training, I have trained runners where I'm like, we're not even going to strength train for, this duration of time because you're running so much. And then conversely, like there has to be kind of that deload off season time where you're not running as much and then maybe yeah you're hitting that those 4 days a week.
Absolutely. And those times are really we're in our off season, if we're coming off of a racing season and we want to spend a little bit more time on strength. Obviously, if your goals are a little bit more strength oriented, you want to spend more time strength training, you need to have a little bit more volume. But for, supporting our running in general, I think it's less than most people assume.
I actually have a woman who I was working with, and she was like, she's like, I feel so good. Like, I feel amazing strength training. I think she was hitting like 1 to 2 days a week. And she's like, but I'm only doing 1 to 2 days a week. Like, am I okay? Like, is that enough? And I was like, yes, of course. Like, you're doing everything you need. It's just being consistent is really the most important thing.
Absolutely, 100%. I totally agree. Um, it really just thinking about like placing the emphasis on what your current goal is.
Yeah, too. And then having like people like us or whatever that looks like, just to be able to coach you is helpful too. In each session, so in each strength training session, those 2 to 4 days, how many exercises should we be doing per session, we'll say?
Yeah, so on average, I would say about between 4 to 6 per workout. I've even seen as low as 3 if we're in like a lower volume. But typically I'm looking at about 2 compound lifts and about 2 to 3 accessories.
I totally agree. We both have like strength training programs that we curate for women individually and then in a group setting. So I've had lots of practice making these things. So yeah, I do the same. I do the same as well. Can you tell me and us what like the difference between a compound and accessory lift is?
A compound is going to be more like your big moves, so like your squat, your deadlift, your bench press, your row, that type of thing. And accessories are going to be working on like smaller muscle groups, maybe even single muscle, single joint exercises. So that's more, looking at your back flies or your calf raises or, your quad or hamstring isolation, things like that. And as well as like core work and things too.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. And then, so we're doing anywhere from like 4 to 6 exercise per workout. What about like dosage? Like what dosage should we be looking at as runners? Break that down for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a common misconception with runners that we be lifting for endurance with like lots of reps and really load. The opposite is actually true. We really want to be lifting a little bit heavier. So typically we're looking at working mostly in sets of, 3 sets of between 5 to 12 reps, the lower rep range preferred. I'm most often prescribing sets of like 5 to 8 reps. With about 2 to 3 reps left in the tank at the end of each set, or reps in reserve. I use RPE and reps in reserve with my lifters. So we're not necessarily, lifting to maximum intensity. It's not required for strength gains. We just want to make sure that we're within a certain approximation to failure.
Yeah, I love that. I think training at some of those higher intensities where I use RPE too, which is rate of perceived exertion. So it's a 0 to 10 scale, 10 being like, this is the hardest I've ever worked, 0 being like you're sleeping. I prescribed for my first like maybe 2 exercises of the series, getting up to like that 8 out of 10 RPE with like a 5 to 8 rep count. And it is kind of, it's a little bit uncomfy if you haven't been there before. So I like to put that in there and challenge people in that way, and then have some maybe compound lifts that are more in like that 3 sets of 12 range. But it is really fun to get in those higher weight, lifting heavier.
Yes. And I think it can be semi intimidating for some runners when they think about like, ooh, I'm supposed to be lifting heavy. But it's important to remember that heavy lifting is relative. So it's all based on you and your own experience. So, you're going based on your own effort and gauging it that way. So I also think that the transition from, lifting a little bit heavier within these lower rep ranges, when runners transition to it, it can kind of be a hard switch coming from, maybe doing a program that has like 10 to 12 exercises and you're doing, a ton of volume with lighter load. It's a totally different style of strength training, but so it can be difficult to make that switch. But I think when you do, I think a lot of runners have
Yeah,
a lot of
for
fun
sure.
with
I
it.
totally agree. And then in the strength training days and all the stuff we talked about, what kinds of lifts should be included in our programming for runners?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when it comes to exercise selection, you see a lot of like, crazy things out there, but really the bread and butter stuff is what you mostly want to be sticking to. I think that when it comes down to it, the best strength training plan isn't going to look very exciting and
Yeah.
might feel a little bit monotonous. So consistently hitting, your compound moves like different squat variations, different deadlift variations. I like to include upper body strength training like pulling and pushing moves, making sure you're doing single leg and single arm variations as well. Plyometrics to build power. I'll let you kind
Yeah,
of
I
jump in
totally
as well
agree.
too.
I really do largely the same. I'm huge on having like 1 to 2 heavy lifts, like with the compound motions. And then the unilateral is just like it's so important for runners because we do notice that there are like imbalances between side to side. And then it's just a huge way to like correct some of those, and then you can work on any form things as well too with the unilateral work.
Yeah, running is a single leg sport, and some of those like single leg and single arm, variations also add, a bit of a rotational component as well. So all good things to be included. As well as, I didn't mention this either, but also, super important for runners as well. We talked a lot about compound lifts, but making sure to include, running specific isolation exercises, especially like calf strengthening, is super important to have
Yeah, for
consistently in your
sure.
plan as a
And then
runner.
the plyometric component as well that we touched on for power. I love adding plyometrics into my runner strength training program. I think there is this element with strength training that you want to almost like supersede or like go above the demands of what you need to do with running. So running is literally like millions of just single leg hops over and over. So if you're training that in the gym and you're doing maybe it's like squat jumps, maybe it's box jumps, whatever it looks you're really going to build up like a ton of strength in that way. That's going to allow you to be a way more resilient runner once you're doing, millions of single leg hops over and over.
Absolutely, yeah. Plyometrics are super important, and we don't have to do, we don't have to be doing a ton of them. These are usually done in the beginning of the workout, usually before the compound lift, so that we're nice and fresh. Not as many reps for these, and lots of rest. Rest was something that we
Oh,
also
yeah.
didn't talk about yet as workout structure, which is something that I've been talking a
Yes.
little bit more about on my page, because I think this is something that many people know. I think our tendency is to rest for like 30 to 60 seconds and just move on to the next lift. But for our compound lifts, we really want to be resting between 2 and 5 whole minutes. Our accessories, 90 seconds to up to 3 minutes is important. And this time isn't, just to sit around. We're waiting for, our bodies to regenerate ATP for energy to maximize
Yeah.
what we're doing in our next set. So if we're not having that rest period, then we are not getting the
Yeah,
most out of our
for sure.
subsequent
And
sets.
even like anecdotally, like once you start to lift heavier and then you go at that 60-second, 30-second mark, there's no gas in the tank. Like there's nothing there.
No. Yes, I often tell my runners, if you don't want that whole rest,
Yeah.
increase the
Oh
weight.
my gosh. Yes, for sure. It's such a different mindset of training, and it does take patience to get there. But it's worth it.
I absolutely agree. And I think there's just this tendency amongst runners of, we don't like standing or sitting still. We're used to having our heart rate up and breaking a sweat for our entire, running workout. But that is the exact opposite of what we want in the gym. If you look around, if you go to a weight room and you look around, like the most serious people in there are spending half their time just like scrolling on their phone or like
It's so true. My husband is, I'm like, you just sit on your phone the whole time. And then I was like, oh, okay, I get it. I get it now. Oh my gosh. And then we talked about this a little bit, but how should we structure our workouts with all of these things?
Absolutely. So typically I would put like a plyo first if we're going to do that in the workout. But the next first would be our compound lifts. So those that require like most of our, energy. And then we're putting our like accessories and our isolation moves towards the end of our workout. You can also create supersets with more of your like accessory or isolation moves. I do this a lot to save time. There's a couple different ways you can do this. So you can do a superset with 2 exercises that work opposing muscle groups like hamstrings, quads. You can do that this is more kind of a compound set with the same muscle group, so like bench press and a push-up. You could also do a set with unrelated exercises, so like a back fly and a reverse lunge. Often using the unrelated kind or the opposing muscle group kind because I'm using it to save time. So we're trying to cut down on the rest that's required to get the most out of our sets.
That's excellent. And then just if anyone doesn't know, superset is like where you go through like exercise A, exercise B, exercise C, and then you run it through again. I don't like to superset my compound motions because just it's exhausting. You want all of the gas in the tank. And also if you're lifting at a gym and you get the squat rack or you get the bar, it is feisty territory. Like people are going to take that from you. So it's best to just kind of stay there and use it.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing it back to explain what a superset is. You do like one exercise, then the next, then you rest, and then you repeat it. I think sometimes when we, get together and talk about these things, just us like coaches in general, I think sometimes we forget the jargon and how like not all of those things are just like intuitively known. So thank you for catching that.
Lingo that I know that I'm like, I shouldn't know this much. And then I think, so another fun thing that I like to do for my my runners, so I program like a 3-day split for my runners, which is like, they train up to 3 days a week in my program. And I have made my program so it's training each planes of the body. So the first day we're training like this plane, the second day we're training all motions that go in this plane, and then the last day is like transverse, which is like twisting. And then that day is typically a little bit lighter, so I add my plyos into there. But it's a really fun way to be like, okay, this is what we're doing today. And there's a ton of different ways you can structure it, but I do think having structure is important.
So true. That's a really interesting split. I like that. And you bring up a good point too, that there's so many different ways to break down your workouts. I'm typically having my runners do 2 full body lifts per week. I often will group together like squatting and pushing movements and hinging and pulling movements. And if we're having like a third shorter lift with maybe some more accessories, some more core work. And when I say core, I'm not like talking about like sit-ups and stuff, yes, but also things like farmer carry and that type of thing. And when it comes down to it, our best core exercises really are things like
squats. For sure. I think I posted the other day that I have not done a sit-up in like 2 years. Like it feels awful.
I also haven't done a burpee either. And who knows
like
when.
I don't know. I just don't. That's a conversation for another time. But they do not serve me.
Absolutely.
So what about changing the workouts? Like how often should our program be updated? What should this look like?
Yeah. So I think this is where there's a lot of maybe disagreement like among the like community of force strength training for runners. But as far as using the best evidence that we have available, we really don't want to be changing our workouts as much as many people
Mhm.
think. Really minimum 4 weeks spending with the same workouts, and even up to like 12 weeks. I would say I'm most often having my runners spend about 6 weeks in a training block before
Mhm.
really changing anything. Uh, Even when we are making those changes, I'm not necessarily like throwing away the whole workout or giving you something that looks completely different. We're using those same principles through and progressing upon what we've been doing. I might, even have them do, the same exact compound lift for longer if they're continuing to progress in it. I may just change the set and rep structure to that exercise. And I'm usually changing up accessories or isolation exercises at this time. But the whole point is that we're not trying to
Mhm.
drastically change the whole program. I think people assume that a program that has a lot more variation or excitement is
Mhm.
better, but it's just
Yeah,
not
yeah,
true.
we want this whole idea. There's an idea in strength training of progressive overload. So you want to like maybe start with the squat and then add a little bit more and add a little bit more. And if you're doing a squat with a bicep curl, with a punch, with a burpee, it's really hard to challenge the system in an effective way that is going to build strength. That move is actually, it's fine, but it's actually more of a cardio based move as opposed to true strength training.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think just when it comes to, that idea of progressive overload, when you're changing your workouts, like every week, or more frequently than like monthly, we're not giving ourselves enough time to implement progressive overload. Um, and I mean, I personally, I used to lift that way. Like I used to, use an app and like try a different workout every week or like a couple different workouts every week. And it was a great way to introduce myself to
Mhm.
strength training. But I never really much stronger. I wasn't getting past like the same dumbbells I had been using for a while. I was always sore because I was
Mhm.
always doing something new. And I really felt like I knew what I was doing. It wasn't until I started working with a strength coach and I, started to learn some of these things on my own as well. But once I started, actively implementing doing the same workouts for weeks on end, that's when I started to see change. And I really thought I would
Yeah.
be very bored, but honestly, the opposite happened. I started understanding what I was doing. I started feeling confident in my workouts, going into the gym, knowing exactly what I was doing and, progressing and seeing I was getting stronger in what I was doing. So I really had a lot more buy-in when I started doing, more of the monotonous stuff that is just getting back to
Yeah, for
basics.
sure. I couldn't agree more. I have a very similar story. And I do find it therapeutic in the same way that I find running therapeutic. Once I became more accustomed to going to the gym and getting in the zone and being like, okay, I gotta push this and then I gotta rest. So I think there is hope for it being the same kind of mental relief that you get with running as well.
Absolutely. I hear that a lot from my runners who transition to more towards this, style of strength training versus the more like common
Yeah.
runner strength training you see out there. Uh, just, feeling a lot more enjoyment in what they're doing. So yeah, I completely agree. Um,
Yeah. So what about like I get this question a lot. How when should we strength train? Like if I have to run 4 days a week or I want to run 4 days a week and I also want to get my 2 days of strength training in or 4 days, what the heck should I do?
yes, yes, absolutely. And it takes like, I honestly think it does take a
Yeah.
lot of trial and error because everybody's different. Uh, but just for general rules of thumb, depending on how many days per week you're running, you can lift on your non-running days. If you choose to do that, I recommend not strength training the day
Yeah.
before speed work or long run. Um, but if you, run too many times in a week to do your strength training on non-running days, then typically what I will recommend is
Hmm.
keeping your hard days hard and strength training on the same days as
Hmm.
your speed work days. Um, if we're working on goals, we want to be running first, and vice versa. If you're, in a more strength-oriented block, I would want you to strength train first. The best option is separating by like morning, evening sessions. I know that's not always possible. We really want to avoid like lifting and running back to back. But if you can only separate it by like a few hours, be sure to like refuel in those two sessions.
I really enjoy your point on like keeping your hard days hard. If you're going to it feels counterintuitive, but if you're going to lift, putting that on your speed day or your longest run day, I wouldn't really recommend that, but the strength training and speed work on the same day would be the best, because you're not going to become sore until probably the next day, which then it would be very uncomfortable to perform the speed work. But like an easier kind of recovery shakeout or just lower distance run will feel fine if you're sore.
Exactly. So for those days, like say you have a day where you do your speed work and your run, the next day should either be a easy recovery run, a rest day, or like a easy cross training day.
And then if you do have to put strength training and running together in the same day, same time block, again, personal preference wins everything, but there has been research done that doing the strength training before you're running has shown better results for like just strength adaptations, doing it before. So that's my personal preference, but you just got to do what works, and life gets busy and you got to get it in somehow.
Absolutely. And I think that, trying some different options for you is what's really important. I have some people that like really hate strength training in the morning and feel better after they've had a couple meals in them. So it really does come down to personal preference, following the general, rules for basic recommendations, but it's not one size fits all.
For sure. Yeah. Trial and error is literally the best thing. Definitely. If anyone has questions, feel free to just send it our way. We would love to answer them. But our next question is, what are some of your favorite moves for yourself, or even like to program for your runners?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess I'll just talk about like my favorite variations. So I really love like a single leg Romanian deadlift. I love a split squat for runners. I love a step up. Let's see. I listed these because I have a lot, but as far as, those main lifts, I also love a single arm bent over row for runners, lat pull down. On the more accessory side of things, I really like things like farmer carries, lunges, side lunges, planks, Copenhagen planks, that type of thing.
I'm with you on those. I do really like squat variations, back squat or front squat. I think front squat is just awesome for some gals with hip stuff, because we just get a little bit less impingement for most people.
Actually, a note about the front squats. I think we talked about this. Back squats. So like I'm someone who has like really long femurs relative to my torso. So just mechanically, and I tried to back squat for so many years, it just does not work biomechanically for me. So I recently transitioning over to more like front squatting. I really just love like how engaged your core feels too when you're doing it.
Yes, for sure. And the front squat is a little bit hard. Like the front squat is like either you're using dumbbells or the bar, and you're like putting it literally like on the front of you. And getting into the like position is very challenging. My husband had to help me a lot with like the cueing. So working on it with just like the bar for a little bit is a great place to start. But it just is so quad heavy. It's abdominal heavy, which is awesome for runners. It can be a little bit more comfortable for people. So I really like that. Really any single leg exercise for me is awesome. I love single leg deadlift, trying not to like hold on to anything for that like balance and stability. Lunges are a great one to just kind of see what your hips and legs are doing. And then I do love, like truly just love any like dead bug or bird dog variation, where you're having to like stabilize your core and using more of the like tonic or postural muscle fibers, we can really parse out like a ton of like core imbalances that will have a huge effect on the hip. And I use those in place of any sit-ups.
Love that. I really, on the core side, been really loving things like along similar lines, quadruped hold variations with different like arm presses, things like paddle off presses. I've been really liking those, kettlebell halos, that type of thing. So thinking more functional.
Yeah, there's so much you can do. I feel like if you feel lost and you've been kind of doing the app game for a while and you're like, I'm doing this one or this one, and you're not having that consistency, reaching out to either one of us would be a great place to start. Can you tell me a little bit about what programmings and programs you offer?
Absolutely. So I just want to say one thing about the exercises before we, it's important to remember that there's no like one or like five best exercises for runners. So if you're feeling like overwhelmed out there and you're like, I don't even know what those exercises are, there's no, pick. It's important to remember that. The bread and butter, the big key is consistency. So picking exercise, sticking with them. But as far as what I offer for strength coaching, I have two different options for runners. I do have like a one-on-one run and strength coaching program as well. If you're interested in more combination stuff, you have some running goals you want to work on. But I offer a one-on-one strength coaching program for runners. So if you want a more personalized plan, you want to check in with me weekly, you want to send me, just having a little bit more of a custom plan, that is what that is for. And then I also have a program called Strong Beginnings. This is my strength training program for runners who are newer to strength training. It is more of a group. It is a prefab plan that is created specific to runners to help you learn how to strength train as a runner. So while this plan isn't personal, get weekly check-ins with me. You also get video form checks and all of that good stuff. So if you're interested in hearing more of those things, you can hop over to my page and just shoot me a message. I always respond.
Way to not leave people hanging. That's awesome. Yes.
Tell me about yours.
Yes. So I have two kind of main programs that I offer. My number one program is my Hip Return to Run program. This is like really specialized, individualized care. You will get like strength and motor control, kind of exercises that are tailored specific to you, and maybe any like hip symptoms that you have going on, that will allow you to strength train and run comfortably. We will progress you through the continuum up to these just super, I don't want to say generic, but just non-specialized strength training exercises. And then kind of my like catapult off of that, and where people can just join in, is my strength training for runners made simple membership. And then that is like my prefab plan. So it's 3 days a week training split. It's in each of the different planes of the body. It's super easy to follow along. And then in that program, everyone that's in it gets like a once a month, we do like a group coaching call. And if you can't, you just send in questions. And if you can't make it, I record the whole thing and then it's uploaded to your user profile. So it's a fun way to just have a plan and community.
Absolutely. I love that idea. It's an awesome program that you run there. So you're all doing the same workouts for that training block and moving on through it together. I think, as if you're a runner out there looking to work with a strength coach, look around, talk to a couple different people. Aside from the strength expertise, everybody has a little bit different of an approach. Everybody has a little bit different of a personality. So, take the time to find someone that you really jive with. That's my biggest advice for people out there looking to looking to work with a strength coach, because I do think that it is highly valuable when you're someone who's looking to get into strength training, just having someone, they're able to bounce ideas off of and
Yeah,
just point
for
you in the right
sure. And
direction.
there's just so many different options. So taking the time and finding the person that's right for you that's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anything else that you have on your mind that you want to say for the world about strength training for runners?
I don't necessarily think so. I will say I do feel, if I have one mission in life, it's to get a set of weights in the hands of as many people as possible. This isn't just to support your running. This is like to support your life as a human. I've heard people describe strength training as like the one fountain of youth that we do have. And I believe that that is absolutely true. This is, this kind of regular exercise like this is going to help you continue to do the things that you want to do long into your life, not just running, things like carrying all your groceries in from the car or carrying the basket of laundry up the stairs. Those things are really important too. So it's important to remember that, this isn't just like for running. This is something that is really amazing to do, for yourself, for
Yeah,
your
for
life
sure.
as well.
That's an excellent point. And I would even venture to say, while I love running and running is amazing, I would say strength training is actually going to provide like greater longevity. It's going to help you more, yeah, more
So
functionally. And I always tell like, because it makes sense, I guess it makes sense, for people that are younger or moms and have kids, I need to lift them and whatever. But I'm always like telling my parents, I'm like, you're going to have to be able to lift my grandchildren and pick them up and get up and off the floor. So it is something or for their grandchildren. It's something for everyone at every stage of life.
absolutely. I mean, I have a few athletes on my roster right now who I strength coach who are in their 50s and 60s. My mom's in her 60s. I coach her as well. So, I think it's something that's more accessible and more
Yep.
simple than people think. So I think just conversations like this, helping make it more accessible, and just spreading the word about how important it is are super important. And I completely agree with you. Like, as much as I love running,
Yeah.
strength training is more important,
Yeah.
like for
It's way
being a
more
human.
important. Bone density, like hormones, it's just the best. It's really the best.
It is. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. I'm so glad we were able to just chat about this. I don't go live much, so I
Yeah.
will find a way to share this to my page. So anyone coming from my page, you can watch it again. I'm sure Sarah's going to do the same thing.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah,
I'll
thank you
invite
so
you and
much.
then you can share it on your page. Um, and yeah, if anyone has follow-up
Great.
questions, feel free to just like put it in the comments and we can just hop on stories later and answer it. No big deal. But yeah, thanks so much for coming on, Kate. You
Awesome. Thank you,
too.
Sarah. Have
Bye,
a great
Kate.
rest of your day.